Psalm 103, and I can keep this thing from falling over. Okay, we're looking at verse 6 today. The Lord works righteousness and justice for all the oppressed. This is an interesting concept. Remember the old days when, what was his name? It was a comedian, had a it doesn't matter. He used to have this thing, things that make you go, This is one of those things for me. The Lord works righteousness and justice for all the oppressed. So, all right. In order to make sense of this, we have to understand, what does it mean that the Lord works righteousness and justice for anybody? All right. Righteousness, not hard, has to do with what is right. And justice is always connected to righteousness, because justice is always that something is, if something is done according to justice, it's done according to what is right. When it works as it's designed and supposed to work, our justice system is about doing for people what is right. And justice happens when being right is rewarded and being wrong is punished. Okay. See, this is not like some kind of a graduate level philosophical idea. It's not about what's fair. Fair, if you've had kids, you realize that one of their attempted trump cards has been, you remember this? It's just not fair. Well, really? That's probably true. A large percentage of the time, it isn't fair. There are many times when what is right is not fair. One of the problems that I think has pushed our culture, our society to the brink of the cliff I think we're on, is that we have misinterpreted, misassigned fairness to be equal to justice. That's not, it isn't. Is justice always fair? Think about it. I actually know. See, let me give you just one example. Let's say somebody steals my stuff out of my car, all right? They get caught. And, okay, now this is you'll know now it's a fully hypothetical situation, because they not only get caught, they get arrested, and they come before a judge. Well, but between their arrest and coming before the judge, they came to Jesus and had a genuine, thorough change of heart. So is it fair for them to be punished for what they did? Well, some people would say, no, they're a changed person. Shouldn't that be enough? Well, that would be fair, but it wouldn't be just. And it's not that simple. That's the lowest hanging fruit I could think of. But the principle remains: what is just, what is righteous, may not be fair. It often doesn't seem fair. Okay, so if we can make that distinction in our adult minds and somehow embrace the truth that fair is not equal to just, all right? But now we have to come back to this idea that the Lord works righteousness and justice for all the oppressed. Look around. Tell me what you think. What does that look like in the world? Well, don't start with our world. Let's start with David's world. Who were oppressed in David's world? Let's start it societally. Widows, orphans. Widows, the only means of support that a widow would have was their surviving family. Orphans, unless someone took them in, adopted them, and provided for them, they had no visible means of support. They were truly oppressed. They sold themselves as slaves. If the widows were young enough, they might sell themselves into prostitution. But they were oppressed. There were prisoners of war, oppressed. Israel had been oppressed by its enemies. David knew about oppression. And the Lord works righteousness, what is right, and justice, what is just, for all the oppressed. Really? My youngest daughter, Jenny, she's amazing. If you ever have had the privilege of meeting her, you have met, I can't be objective, I admit it, but you've met greatness. She's incredible. She works for and with a group called Olive Crest. They are at work to keep as many kids out of the system, foster care system, as possible. And for those that are in, to provide them with families who are truly loving, who do the right thing, who they're not doing this for just to generate the income. And they work with kids who are aging out, because at age 18, you're no longer in the system. And for the vast majority of those young people, they're on their own. They're out of that family. They don't get any more of the financial or emotional, physical support. Have to figure it out, which is very difficult for most of these kids who have been moved from house to house to house to home to home to home to home. They don't, it's not the kid's fault. Most of these kids have never been in the same home long enough, and a stable home long enough, to learn the skills of making it in life. And so at age 18, they're out. And they will scrap and scrape. And sometimes they make very poor choices. Well, Jenny's group is helping those kids find their way. They're truly oppressed. And this has nothing to do with the government doesn't take good care of them. That's not where I'm going with this. I'm just saying a series of events, that most of which they had no control over, have occurred in these kids' lives, and they're oppressed. The Lord works righteousness and justice for them. Really. All right, now, if you only want to do this on the basis of a snapshot, this doesn't work. You show me how the Lord is at work, how he works righteousness, is working so that what is right will happen for these kids. I can't. Now I can show you people like Jenny and Olive Crest who they're laying it down. I mean, they're putting out. It's not just a nice, good idea that makes people feel good. That's not what this is about. This is not virtue signaling. This is about spending time, money, effort, sweat, blood, tears. In that regard, the Lord is working righteousness for these kids. He is working justice for these kids. Now, here's one of the difficulties with that. God's righteousness and his justice are not snapshot matters. There are times when his righteousness and his justice takes decades. Let me just give you one example of that is Joseph in the Old Testament, not Jesus' stepfather. Joseph in the Old Testament, sold into slavery as an adolescent, cream rises to the top always. And his story is a story of the cream rising to the top. But it was not a simple and not a well-ordered story. He was accused by Potiphar's wife of attempted rape, which he did not do. She attempted to seduce him. He literally ran out of his coat, which she had held on to, trying to get him into bed. Well, he was arrested and thrown into prison. Providential, in my opinion, by God's intervention, he was not murdered. Potiphar had every right to have him killed, but he didn't do that. He threw him in prison instead. Well, you would think if God is going to work his righteousness, a few nights in jail, that's enough. No, he spent years in jail until finally God's righteousness and his justice were executed. And you need to go into Genesis and read Joseph's story again. It's a great story. Tell it to your kids and your grandkids. It's a fabulous story of God working righteousness and working justice on his behalf. And it's a story of the fact God is not working on the same tight time frame that we are. I want things to be quick, right? Okay, I understand adversity deepens me, strengthens me, but that's enough, okay? I'm done. I don't think I'm the only one. I think we're all that way. None of us wants God's righteousness or his justice to take a long time. But sometimes it does. Well, in fact, some person murdered my grandmother in LA many decades ago now. Stabbed her in the heart with a screwdriver because she interrupted them in their breaking and entering. To my knowledge, they were never apprehended. Where's the justice in that? Well, it doesn't keep me awake at night. My grandma, late in her life, had come to Jesus. I don't have a problem believing that she's in heaven with him now, but her murderer, I don't think has ever been caught. So what about God's righteousness and justice for that? Will there come a time, actually, I don't know what to call it, a moment, because it won't be in time, that God's justice will be fulfilled. His righteousness will be fulfilled. It's not my job to do that, to fulfill either of those. I don't know if that makes any difference in anybody's life, but if it does, it comes down to this. It's God working his righteousness. It's God working his justice, not me. Okay. See you next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.